Welcome to Schools Not Out, your daily classroom for CSEC and CAPE students. You can watch this lesson on real time on TVJ Jamaica's YouTube channel or One Spot Media. We're also live on Music 99. If you have questions on today's subject, you can send them in to TVJ Jamaica's Facebook page or Instagram at television_Jamaica. Today's lesson is on CSEC English A. I'm Daphine Simon. What do you want me to do now? I invite students to think about the upcoming exam, and I do recommend that you look at the syllabus. The syllabus tells you exactly what is being tested, and it's very important for you to know that. So let's look at what they have to say. The objective of the exercise and the story, as you will know, appears on the paper 2 of the examination, and they tell you specifically that your story is to be pleasing, aesthetic satisfaction. They want you to be able to organize and sequence ideas to communicate emotional and imaginative interpretations of experience. And finally, they expect you to use language. They expect you to use language that's appropriate for particular contexts. So with that as a background, I'd like to encourage students not to feel very intimidated by the short story. It's true, the short story is very different in what it requires you to do from many of your classroom activities or your homework activities, or even some exam activities. Producing a short story in an exam is very different and requires different skills. So I am very sympathetic towards our students who may feel a little intimidated by producing under pressure. But I can assure you, if you become familiar with what the examiners are interested in seeing, if you practice enough, you can be completely relaxed that you have as good a chance on this topic as on any other. It's an important part of the exam, it's true. Many marks are weighted on it, but if you approach it knowing the expectation, you're always good to go. So let's look at how we'll begin. I think perhaps we should pause at this moment, to ensure that we all are thinking of the same thing when we say short story. Because if we're not on the same page, we may have some confusion. So let's look at a definition. It's a tale, a narrative, set in a particular time, involving specific players, and is made up most often of an event or events, happenings, that unfold and eventually come to an end. That definition will embrace most of the short stories that you'll ever read. Perhaps one or two will still stand out, but it works. So you go into the exam being confident you know what they want. It's a story, and you know what that is. So the question you really ask yourself once you step in is, what will the story be about? Who will be in the story? And that's where your planning begins. Focus. You have started to plan. Focus on what you are asked to write about. You're given choice. And I have here 4 different types of story prompts that you could get. You could get a picture, and the intention of that is for the picture to steer your thinking in a particular direction. You could get an opening sentence like this one. With so many persons falling ill within such a short space of time, I decided to abandon the plan to be a healthcare provider. That one is very topical, but you can see it's a completely different story from the attempt in the first one. Then there is C. Doesn't give you much room. It leaves everything to you. It just simply says, the unconquered. So you're going to have to work that in whichever direction you think will bring out the idea of someone somewhere being unconquered. And then D, I find D very interesting because D starts you right in the middle of the story. It gives you the climax. He vaulted the bar and the crowd stopped breathing. That, for me, if I were personally choosing, I think I'd go for that because it has, for my imagination, the ingredients that makes me want to try. So, you are in the exam, you're looking at the paper now, and you are going to select. So you ask yourself, what will my story look or feel like? Will it look like this, where you have an individual looking at an expanse of scenery? Do you think you can make that into a story, if that's the idea that comes to your mind? Or are you down and out? Will the story have sounds and movement? Because these both, this looks like a gang fight to me, so there are going to be sounds there, and this looks like a business venture, so there's going to be movement there. Will my story have those features? When we come back, we'll begin to develop some of these and show you how it's practical to make this a good item on which to score high. So, until we are back.
PM to 4 p.m. School's Not Out. Live CSEC and CAPE lessons here on TVJ. The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, along with TVJ, present School's Not Out. CSEC and CAPE lessons live Mondays to Fridays from 9 a.m. to 12 noon, with weekly School's Not Out tutorial sessions on Saturdays from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. School's Not Out. Live CSEC and CAPE lessons here on TVJ. The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, along with TVJ, present School's Not Out. CSEC and CAPE lessons live Monday.
A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Reduce your risk of viral illnesses like the flu and coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water. Cover your nose and mouth when coughing with a tissue and dispose of it. Avoid close contact with anyone with a cold or flu-like symptoms. If you become ill, please visit your doctor or the nearest health center and share your travel history. The flu and coronavirus can kill. Let's protect each other. A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
Tip: protect yourself and others from getting sick by washing your hands after coughing or sneezing, when caring for the sick, before, during, and after you prepare food, before eating, after toilet use, when hands are visibly dirty, and after handling animals or animal waste. 19
from 9 a.m. to 12 noon, with weekly Schools Not Out tutorial sessions on Saturdays from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Schools Not Out, live CSEC and CAPE lessons here on TVJ. The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, along with TVJ, present Schools Not Out, CSEC and CAPE lessons live Mondays to Fridays from 9 a.m. to 12 noon, with weekly Schools Not Out tutorial sessions on Saturdays from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Schools Not Out, live CSEC and CAPE lessons here on TVJ. The Ministry of Education, Youth and
Reduce your risk of viral illnesses like the flu and coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water. Cover your nose and mouth when coughing with a tissue and dispose of it. Avoid close contact with anyone with a cold or flu-like symptoms. If you become ill, please visit your doctor or the nearest health center and share your travel history. The flu and coronavirus can kill. Let's protect each other. A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
Information, along with TVJ, present Schools Not Out, CSEC and CAPE lessons live Mondays to Fridays from 9 a.m. to 12 noon, with weekly Schools Not Out tutorial sessions on Saturdays from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Schools Not Out, live CSEC and CAPE lessons here on TVJ.
Protect yourself and others from getting sick by washing your hands after coughing or sneezing, when caring for the sick, before, during, and after you prepare food, before eating, after toilet use, when hands are visibly dirty, and after handling animals or animal waste. COVID-19.
Reduce your risk of viral illnesses like the flu and coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water. Cover your nose and mouth when coughing with a tissue and dispose of it. Avoid close contact with anyone with a cold or flu-like symptoms. If you become ill, please visit your doctor or the nearest health center and share your travel history. The flu and coronavirus can kill. Let's protect each other. A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Reduce your risk of viral illnesses like the flu and coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water. Cover your nose and mouth when coughing with a tissue and dispose of it. Avoid close contact with anyone with a cold or flu-like symptoms. If you become ill, please visit your doctor or the nearest health center and share your travel history. The flu and coronavirus can kill. Let's protect each other. A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, along with TVJ, present Schools Not Out, CSEC and CAPE lessons live Mondays to Fridays from 9 a.m. to 12 noon, with weekly Schools Not Out tutorial sessions on Saturdays from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Schools Not Out, live CSEC and CAPE lessons here on TVJ. The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, along with TVJ, present Schools Not Out, CSEC and CAPE lessons live Mondays to Fridays from 9 a.m. to 12 noon, with weekly Schools Not Out tutorial sessions on Saturdays from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Schools Not Out, live CSEC and CAPE lessons here on TVJ.
Reduce your risk of viral illnesses like the flu and coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water. Cover your nose and mouth when coughing with a tissue and dispose of it. Avoid close contact with anyone with a cold or flu-like symptoms. If you become ill, please visit your doctor or the nearest health center and share your travel history. The flu and coronavirus can kill. Let's protect each other. A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Reduce your risk of viral illnesses like the flu and coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water. Cover your nose and mouth when coughing with a tissue and dispose of it. Avoid close contact with anyone with a cold or flu-like symptoms. If you become ill, please visit your doctor or the nearest health center and share your travel history. The flu and coronavirus can kill. Let's protect each other. A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Reduce your risk of viral illnesses like the flu and coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently.
Welcome back to Schools Not Out, where we are discussing the CSEC English A examination with the short story in particular. Where we stopped the last time, you were beginning to plan. You were beginning to have ideas as to what the kind of story you would like to write. And don't rush it. There is time within the 40-minute span that you get to plan. So don't get nervous. Ask yourself these questions. What kind of story would I like to produce? If you internalize that, it usually goes with this other question. What will the mood of my story be? What kind of story? How will it make the reader feel? All of those ideas are coming into your mind, and you're going to make some decisions, and you're going to make some jottings. So let's remind ourselves of the possibilities. If I say what kind of story I'm going to write, will it be a matter-of-fact narrative? This happened and then this happened. Those stories don't usually come off very interesting, and they don't usually score you very high either. So maybe not that. Instead, how about a dramatic and surprising story? Everybody likes reading those. So if you can organize to get your story to sound dramatic, that's very good. Maybe that's not your talent, but humor is. Lots and lots of students are very good at including humorous tips in their story, and it makes it very lovely reading. So that's a possibility. Stories have dialogue. Some students forget to use it as a technique. Some students have a story that is dialogue from beginning to end. Both of those cases overuse the techniques. So if you're going to include dialogue, aim for dialogue that is tense, terse, and not so commonplace that your reader is not affected by it. The people in your story, well, the characters in your story can either be people or animals, and those you have to do things to make them realistic, to make them come across like they could really happen. And finally, the atmosphere, the scene, the backdrop. How do you make it vivid? How do you make it arresting for your reader? All of this is going through your head, right? And you're making some jottings. You're deciding, you're actually in the planning stage, which is perhaps your first 10 minutes, and you're deciding these things as you go along. So now, we're going to start. Here, most students stop just when you're about to start. Most students will say, Miss, I don't know how to start. And what I have noticed is that some of your best stories start very, very abruptly, like the examples we have here. You have a story that begins, it was one of those days when you feel like you could skip work. Nice and abrupt, we don't know where the person is, where they're coming from, but that's the statement, that is the starter. The thing it really tells you is that you're thinking in terms of a work-related story and all that will go with a work-related story. The second example, my cousin Marshall kept 3 dogs and 4 cats. You would not have thought there was room for any more. A very different story is suggested there. And if you are that kind of writer, if that appeals to you, then look more carefully and see if you can make this into the story of choice, right? Where you have lots of animals, probably concentrated in a very restricted domestic environment. That's your kind of story. As I think about it now, that's the kind of story where it is easy for you to introduce humor. A joke here and there makes that story come alive. The next one appeals to me. Somehow, I had never wanted to meet this man. Now that I had, I knew I wasn't wrong. There's a lot of mystery involved in that one that appeals to me. And if I were going into the exam, I think I would be tempted to select that one, right? We'll come back to discussing what each of these stories can contain. But the last point I want to make about starting the story is once upon a time is reserved for fairy tales. It doesn't really fit in very well with modern stories that we tell. Planning, moving on, that's what we're doing. Each starting sentence leads your story in a particular direction. So whichever you select, you're going to look out for the cues that will show you how it's to go forward. And I've worked through the examples we had so that you will see how I think when I see each example. The first of our stories where we heard somebody say they wish they could skip work, you know it's a work-related story. You also know that there has to be something about the work environment that makes the person want to skip. So that to me could very well be the main action of the story. Whatever that discomfort is, whatever is prompting the person to want to skip. And of course, the personalities in that story, the characters, will be work-related characters that you have to develop from your comments and your descriptions, and they have to fit in with a work environment so the story sounds real. The second, this was the one with my cousin. He's idiosyncratic. He has lots of animals in his place, right? So the animals are part of the direction that the story prompt gives you, and the human is probably slightly eccentric because not many people have as many animals as my cousin does. And what you are going to focus on is how these animals and humans behave in relation to each other. That's going to be the main focus of that story. right? And you will also have to focus on details, comments, descriptions that make the animals look real, make the human looks different, and overall achieve the effect of something that possibly could happen. In some stories, animals are even made to talk. So you will decide what you want to do. My favorite. Somehow, I had never wanted to meet this man. Now that I had, I knew I wasn't wrong. What does that tell me? It tells me that the story starts in the present, but pulls on a previous experience. And this is one of the very important techniques in story writing. It's called flashback technique, and it helps a writer to create drama and suspense. So we have the person remembering something from the past, and we have the person describing the character as they have met them now. And the tension between those two leads to a kind of comparison that gives you dynamism to make your story robust. Since it's my favorite, let's continue this a little bit longer. If I were writing it, I would want something like this as the first paragraph. Somehow, I had never wanted to meet this man. Now that I had, I knew I wasn't wrong. His face lacked all expression, except for the eyes, which were small and off-gray and made him look like he was waiting for something. 15 years ago, when we were first introduced, I had dismissed him simply as odd. Today, with his frame half blocking the doorway, he looked decidedly sinister. I have started to write. I've started to frame my story. And one of the things I want you to note, pay special attention to actually, is the way in which the writer selects terms that help you to visualize the character. So we have his expressionless face, his small odd-colored eyes, the attitude of lying in wait for something, half-blocked doorway, sinister. Note as well that you get the opportunity to make contrasts between that old memory and the current character that is in front of you. So now I have started my story, and so you would have to, right? You're going to use your notes, and you're going to use this start and progress. One more thing I'd like to point your attention to is that stories prompted by pictures tend to be regarded in a special way by the students. Some students don't warm towards it, but I would like to show that it's not really that difficult. It's a viable option, except, note, there are no words. Everything then depends on your interpretation of what is pictured. It is what you see, what you interpret, and even though somebody else may interpret differently or see differently from you, you have to make sure that your own interpretation is plausible and realistic to another person who may say, oh, I didn't see it that way, but this could work. When you get a picture, it does some things and it doesn't do some things. The picture sets the subject of the story. The picture sets the story's location and content. It sets the mood. It tells you who is going to be included. All of those things. What it does not tell you, what it does not give, is any direction or sequence of action. You must decide that. There's something else. Please note that instead of being confined by what the story doesn't give, look at your freedom. You're free to decide how the story begins, who plays a part, how the atmosphere will be portrayed, how the story will progress, the most dramatic or climactic point, how the story will end. All of that you are free to make up. So don't shy away from a picture story. It can be very, very viable. Now, I'd like us to look at an example of a picture. I have a picture here that I saw in the newspaper, found intriguing, and if this came on the exam, I see how I could write about it. So let's talk. The picture indicates that the story should involve some beach or seaside. You're able to see that in the background, and you're able to see the big arch of the sky. The picture also provides you with a character. There is a lifeguard at his station, and because it's in the foreground, it tells you that this person probably plays an important role in the story, right? The atmosphere, on the other hand, looks a bit solitary, as there are very few people around. There are some minuscule people on the beach itself, but they are not close. And for that reason, I would say the dialogue in this story is going to be restricted, except if you write your story where you go into the thoughts of the lifeguard, that could become very, very fertile dialogue for your person. Or, depending on what's going to happen, suppose you introduced a scream and a commotion. Somebody gets into trouble and they're to be saved or something. That can be a very, very dramatic inclusion. So it's up to you, but the possibilities are good. You're free to imagine something that happened, the effect it created, and also, how is it going to end? You have to work out the end of your story from the very beginning. It's my recommendation, so that you don't start writing and then it becomes impossible to complete. Of course, details of the personalities, the language, the description, the images that you are going to use, you manipulate those to make your story worth reading. Did I mention the language? Well, this shows you. Opt for mature language. Words like nice and said and talked are so overworked. They don't convey very much to readers. So, nice. If you're talking about a chair, maybe you could choose comfortable. If you're talking about a person, you may want sociable or pleasant. And said, he said, and then she said, and then they all said. Said. Why not shouted, screamed, murmured, stated, confirmed? The English language is wide. Talked? We can substitute that easily. You can articulate, you can mention, you can discuss, you can converse. the shades of meaning, the nuances of meaning that each of those contribute to your story adds up to a fuller, more satisfying read. So, this is my most important slide. Delight the reader. We want stories that are interesting. We want stories that make you feel satisfied when you've read them. And one of the big issues with making a story that works is the element of surprise or suspense that you can inject into your story. As you write your story, you give cues to your reader. And the reader takes those cues and build up a particular expectation. And what we have here is the writer deliberately putting things in that leads the reader where he wants them to go. I remember reading a collection of stories that was called The Twist in the Tale. There were several short stories, and each of those stories had action that developed in one direction and surprised the reader absolutely because the end was totally different. And when you read the end, if you looked back at the story, you saw how you misinterpreted the cues. So that was very, very good reading. So you can try that. Keeping your reader's attention is your primary role as a writer. And you can do that in a number of different ways. Humor. Humor appeals to people. They connect with it. Dialogue is very, very realistic. Graphic descriptions. You have read stories where the writer has described things that are happening, and I'm sure you appreciate good descriptions. When it comes to the atmosphere, certain things can be made palpable almost. Certain things can be made so that you imagine you were there. That's what you're aiming for. And in the creation of the characters, be careful. We want characters that we can believe in. We want characters that seem real. We want characters that fit the context of the story that you are writing. And how do you do that? It is dependent on details that you introduce, comments that you make, conversations that you make them say, descriptions that you include. All of those fit together to help you, your reader, to picture what's going on. So this is what you're aiming at, and this is what your examiner aims to score. Your examiner wants to give you a high mark because you have delighted them. Very, very important. The end of the story. Every story has an end. And you planned how the story was going to end from the very beginning. And when you are through, you must be able to say, this rounds off what I had in mind. That's the purpose of the end of the story. And I want to call your attention to this. Your score is going to be significantly reduced if you don't leave yourself enough time to complete your story. So that's my kicker. A half-written story loses impact. So not only do you plan how it's going to end, you ensure that in writing, you have the time left to put in the end. Now, my other reminders, don't you forget. If you've planned well, if you have established the action in a measured way, you won't end up with something overlong and something so improbable that they say, oh, but that couldn't really happen. That doesn't sound like it could be real. So you don't want that. And perhaps it's a good idea to leave yourself a few minutes at the end to go back over areas in your story in order to check, to make yourself feel comfortable with what was there. Don't be sloppy about your characterization. If you introduce a character, you have to maintain that character and fit them into the flow of the story, and they drop out when it's appropriate for them to drop out. I have read stories where the character begins with one name and ends up with a different name towards the end of the story. That doesn't work. It throws your reader off. And X-rated language, students love to think that that shocks the examiner and perhaps makes their story more exciting, but I think it actually does the opposite. The examiner comes from the position that the English language is so wide in vocabulary that you can find ordinary words, words that are perfectly acceptable to describe any situation that you can imagine. So there is no need for that, and you surely don't get extra for it. So this would have completed your planning and execution of your story. There's one thing else I would like to add, and it goes back to the very beginning where we had talked about a story that began with climax. He vaulted the bar and the crowd stopped breathing. I think that's the kind of story that I find interesting, and I just wanted to suggest how it could be developed very quickly, because some students, from the fact that you don't start at the beginning, they're turned off and they don't feel like that is a viable choice. So if they had 4 choices, they would automatically feel that they've been cut down to 3. But it's not really true. So here we have an example of a person who is involved in a sporting activity, and suppose I were to say the other competitors had been so weak, everyone was shocked when the athlete actually asked for the bar to be set at 5 feet. I don't want to waste my energy at the lower heights, he said. Now, just the inclusion of the words of the athlete is going to be dramatic. Everybody sees the athlete doing something that they didn't expect. They held their breath. And what you do as writer is illustrate the holding of the breath by saying the athlete explains that he didn't wish to lose his energy by doing anything else or starting at a lower level on the bar. And it was a show of confidence on his part that he felt he could clear it. So you are able to do all that you imagine. And as a good teacher, I've set you some homework. And the homework is very important. I really would like for you to do it, because one of the things about becoming a good writer is to practice. You need to try your hand at writing several stories. And I would like you to copy the web address, go to it, and you will see the title Malena, and it comes up with music. So the piece of music is being illustrated all the way through, but there are no words. So the challenge for you is to put words into that video. And when you are through, I want you to read it aloud. I want you to read it to a friend, a parent, a schoolmate. Read and listen to what you have to say. And you decide whether or not you would like your own story. I have listened as a teacher to lots of stories written by students who would want to listen to their own story. And that's not what you're aiming at. You want, of course, to have your story have the exciting elements that you want. And stories don't fit into a box. This one, when I saw it first, I didn't think of it as a story. I thought of it as a piece of music with a video attachment. Sometimes you listen to a piece of music and there are several different videos that can illustrate that, right? This one gives you the ability to try out the words. Another piece of music that I find very interesting, tells a very interesting story, is Barry Manilow's Copacabana. That is a story, a very powerful story, but the music itself probably overshadows the story. But you could do the same. You could write a story and include musical things that you want as well. Because the sounds that come across in your story are important too. What you see, the images, what you can hear, what you can smell. There was an award-winning story one of the years where the writer described a community, and when she was through, you could actually smell the place. And they thought it very, very powerful, and they scored it very, very high. So those are the things we want for you to include in your story. But you can't develop ease with story writing unless you practice. The time in the exam is pretty limited. You have to get a lot done in the time that they provide you. So keep your eye on the clock. Remember that you have to complete the story. You don't want to leave it half done. And to do that, you have to work very efficiently. So you need to practice before to write, change, write, read aloud, listen. And that way, you'll be able to produce a good story within the time frame they have given you and be pleased about your contribution and feel that that was a worthwhile choice that you made. So those are my advice to you. I do wish that the exam had not been put off. I do know that that makes you more nervous, but I think you can impose calm on yourself, and when it comes about, try to be as normal. That's all from me for today. CSEC English A is your job. So if you need to go and look back at the syllabus, do that. I hope you have grasped some of the points we have discussed, and you can catch a repeat of today's lesson on JNN today at 5 p.m. in Schools Not Out, where they have highlights also on Saturday between 1 and 4 right here on TVJ. It will be on video on demand if you want. One Spot Media. Until next time, I'm Daphine.
Education, Youth and Information, along with TVJ, present Schools Not Out. CSEC and CAPE lessons live Mondays to Fridays from 9 a.m. to 12 noon, with weekly Schools Not Out tutorial sessions on Saturdays from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Schools Not Out, live CSEC and CAPE lessons here on TVJ. The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, along with TVJ, present Schools Not Out. CSEC and CAPE lessons live Mondays to Fridays from 9 a.m. to 12 noon, with weekly Schools Not Out tutorial sessions on Saturdays from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m.